Hi, I'm Sherazad. Join me as I speak to Anushka, Yamuna, and Brindha about how the future is female. Hi everyone. Our panel topic today is the future is female, and with me I've got three great panelists. I've got Anushka Wijesinha, who is an economist and works across Asia. He's also the CEO and co-founder of the Center for a Smart Future. I've got Brindha Selvadurai Gnanam, who's also the CEO and co-founder of Hatch. And Brindha works very closely with female entrepreneurs. I've also got Yamuna Jayaratne, who's a real estate marketing veteran and currently the Chief Marketing Officer of Port City, Colombo. Great to have you with us today. Thanks for coming. I'll dive right into the topic, and I'll start with you, Brindha, if you don't mind. When we talk about the future is female, what do we really mean by that?
I think for the future to really be female, we need to start thinking about what's really influencing the young girls and boys as well, right? What's their education system like? What's their environment like? And really try to understand, what's their ideologies and values that are being instilled in them at a young age. And I think all of that really happens at the school level. I also think the narrative around what's out there about opportunities for women also need to change. I think that there's the government, various bodies really need to start taking ownership and kind of saying that, changing the narrative and the message. I think also in the line of work that I do in particular, we really see a need for societal and cultural change as well. And how do you impact or effect cultural and societal change? That really comes from the top. And not just that, but I do think that each and every one of us has a responsibility and a role to play in making opportunities, creating opportunities, making them available, as well as also giving the limelight and sharing success stories as well, so that those conversations become more visible.
When we talk about change, we have seen change, we have seen progress made. Can you talk to me a little bit more about the challenges and some of the success stories in greater detail?
Yeah, sure. So my background is mostly working with entrepreneurs, and I do work a lot with female entrepreneurs, and I have the front row seat almost to see women, quietly conquering really interesting industries like biotech and clean tech, health tech. And while they are doing incredible work, we also see in terms of the challenges, they don't necessarily recognize themselves as leaders, because just speaking to a program that we're running, or we actually concluded in clean tech, in an industry that has 30% of female representation, our program had 70% representation of female leaders, and that's incredible for Sri Lanka. And I also think that it took effort to get the women in these businesses who are co-founders and technical directors to step up and say, yes, I do contribute, and give them a platform to really showcase their work. So in terms of building their confidence, there's a lot of work to be done as well.
I mean, I can say for myself, it's a daily struggle, right? Associating yourself with a leadership position and being confident enough to say that you are a leader. Is that something that you have struggled with as well?
Yeah, I think that's a struggle that probably a lot of women go through. I've spoken to so many women out there that are challenged by that. But I think, again, it's just about surrounding yourself with the right people in the right ecosystem who give you the tools and the encouragement that you need to really empower you. And I think I'm really blessed to have two incredible co-founders who are male, who do just that. And over time, you just build that confidence and you come into your own and learn to do things your own way. Yeah.
Yamuna, how do you get over that constant kind of tendency to underestimate yourself, to not give yourself enough credit, and therefore that reflects across to other people as well?
Yeah. So I think, especially in Sri Lanka's cultural context, and even globally, I think the facts speak for themselves. I mean, if you take, with over 190 heads of state, only 9 or 10 are approximately women. If you take parliamentarians across the world, less than 13% representation is women. If you take C-level jobs, board seats, only 15 to 16% participation globally, if you take a look at statistics, right? So women are basically not getting to the top. Why is that? Because I think women tend to attribute, whereas men, I think most men attribute their success to themselves, because they think they're awesome, and they are, no doubt about it. But women tend to attribute most of their success to external factors. I've had great mentoring, I've had this, I've had that, but I think women need to fully embrace. And it's a complicated challenge because we are conditioned, as I mentioned, to make tough choices between career success and personal fulfillment, because women do, as mothers, have a different role to play. So in that sense, women are faced with tougher choices, and unfortunately, we are still working, especially in the corporate. I mean, I'm mainly from a very corporate background, and I've sort of climbed up the corporate ladder to get to where I am right now, and continue to do so as well. What needs to be created is not equality in the work environment, but a more equitable environment for women. Because if you take senior leadership or senior management in corporates, almost 2/3 of men who are married have children, but only 1/3 of women in senior leadership positions in companies have children. Right? Discrepancy because I mean, I'm mom. I've been in the corporate sector while I was pregnant, while after I had my children, and I went back after 3 months from maternity leave. You are working with a different set of circumstances, right? But what we really require is a more equitable environment for women to stay in work, right? And you shouldn't feel, and women are trained to feel guilty about working and having to leave your kids. I don't know any woman who doesn't feel guilty when their 3-year-old clings to their leg and say, Amma, don't go to work today, which is what I hear every time I step out of the house, right? So I think you need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You do need, it's not a choice for everyone, though. As women, we need to respect the choices that all women make. I think women need to uphold each other. And also, you need to be comfortable being uncomfortable, as I mentioned. Because as a woman being assertive, you will make people uncomfortable, and that's okay, right? But you don't need to put on a tough veneer, because if you do need to do that, that means you lack your self-confidence, and that tough veneer is what's going to gain you respect and acceptance. You don't need to do that. Just be yourself and embrace who you are, without apology, without making excuses, and understand. And I think as women, we need to understand you don't need the validation of any other party, anyone else, to be who you are truly. And I think this is true for men and women alike. So to me, I think if you can get around that, if you can, as Brindha mentioned, if you can try and not feel guilty about being fully present in your career, and being fully present, quality over quantity when it comes to time, with your family and your children, and not feel guilty about it, and change that mindset internally, and be confident in who you are. I think that's the first step in getting to that point.
So you've talked about a lot about being comfortable, being uncomfortable. And while women are grappling with that, there's also the policy side of it where, we can help women not be uncomfortable or not feel uncomfortable in the workplace. And I was wondering, Anushka, if you could talk a little bit more about the policy side of things and how we can, help the future be female through policy initiatives, efforts.
Absolutely, Sherazad. And I think given how many things that policies, laws and regulations govern in a country, in a society, without the future of policy being female, we can't contemplate a future that is more female. And I think on this front, we've had some small wins, and maybe I'll point to those. For example, a very small one would be reforms to the Shop and Office Act, particularly in a way that enabled women to join the tech workforce. That required enlightened government officials, but also a very strong and compelling voice from the private sector and a united voice. But I can't point to too many other, game-changing policy initiatives more recently. And I think the reason why we have to get better at that is because women have historically not been brought into the policymaking table. And what that does is it's not just about feeling good that, we have representation from women at the table, but it's because of the consequences of it. And the consequence is that we end up designing policies and programs that at best don't address the needs of women, but worse, actually do damage to women. Not having women at the table giving input in the design of policies brings about policies like we saw with the COVID relief.
Right.
And I think men designing COVID relief packages, how it's disbursed, when do you go and collect, say, the 5,000 rupees, not understanding that women have certain restrictions in the time of day they can leave, where do they access, what do you give them the money for. When you give them relief packages, it's not just about the dal and rice, but it's also sanitary napkins. So if you have men designing policies and programs, they won't even think of putting that in. And women in different spaces need different things. You have rural women would need a different type of policy intervention, in this case a COVID relief package. Urban poor women living in mid-level, high-rise living in urban settlements require very different needs. So I think that is something we can really change. And again, I want to highlight something I mentioned in a different context, that our assumption that having women in policy making, whether it's women as public officials or women as parliamentarians, is only a small part of the battle. Right. And I'll give you a very quick example before I end on this point. A female entrepreneur who wanted to go and patent a new piece of, a software that she had developed. She wanted to go for a domestic patent first. The intellectual property office, the first interface, largely, women public officers. So she thought, this is going to be great. They'll understand, they'll have empathy. Absolutely not. She went again and again and again, same response. So one day she decided, maybe I'll just go with this other employee of mine, not even in the leadership team, an employee of mine, who's male. The response of this officer completely changed. She accelerated things. She took you seriously. I mean, that's absurd. So the idea that if you have bank officers who are female, we have a lot of bank officers who are female, having parliamentarians, public officials who are female solves things, it's not the case. And for me, it's all about design of how things happen, design of government processes, design of banking practices. That needs to have women embedded in there. I'll give you another very quick example. I was in a conversation with bankers, and one of the female board directors, I'm fortunate to serve with some of them, suggested that maybe we should think about cashback at supermarkets. Right. Because this was a thing in the UK. Why can't people take cash at the supermarket? All the men said, that's just such a silly idea. You can just go to the ATM. You don't need to get cash back at the supermarket. But then I myself and this female director asked all of them, all older men, when's the last time you actually went to a supermarket? your wife or your daughter probably goes to the supermarket or your maid.
Yeah.
So you've never had to experience that, number one. And number two, if women have already limited amount of time in the day when they have to go out and do these errands, do they want to go to the supermarket and the bank or the ATM? So again, it's a very small example, but simply not understanding how to design policies, programs, business practices, processes. I think we can get a lot from those even before we get to big pieces of legislation that supposedly could empower women. It takes long. We should work at it, but I think in the meantime, there's plenty we can do to make things better.
Could you maybe point out to some of the first steps that should be made, if we could name a few policies that maybe at the top of the rung that would need to be dealt with?
So I would say one of the big things that Sri Lanka has to grapple with is an annual budget, right? Allocation by the Treasury every year for different ministries and government programs. We hear it every year, and we have all these post-budget forums. We know this budget process. How many women have been consulted in developing that budget? If you look at all of the private sector forums that are held, all of the meetings that finance ministers and top public officials have at the Ministry of Finance, how many of those actually consult women? Not just as a separate group saying we're having a consultation with women or we're having a consultation with women entrepreneurs. I think that's good, but in the more core mainstream budget discussions, how many women's perspectives are in there? I think just starting with that will be huge, because the budget and that budget allocation determines a large part of how that next year is going to go on education, on health, on agriculture, on innovation, on industry. So I think that's a good but powerful, it's a small but powerful place to start, where in the budget process you get more women in there. Government policies get designed better for women.
Definitely something to think about more. It kind of made me resonate with the point that Brindha and I talked about earlier in some of our earlier conversations about how, in lieu of some of these policy decisions being made or kind of advancements, entrepreneurship is becoming the answer to a lot of these problems, where entrepreneurship is now kind of an alternative career for women who have struggled in the corporate sector. Could you talk to us a little bit more about that, Brindha, and your experience with that?
Yeah, sure. I think, again, I think what it comes down to a lot for women is about flexibility and choice, and to be in a position where that they can feel like they're a great caregiver. And that's not just for children, but elderly parents as well as actually run a business and contribute to the household as well. And so while there is great work already happening within the corporate sector to allow for women to come back into the workplace, I think from what we talk and hear, there's a lot more that needs to be done. And so I think that's why oftentimes entrepreneurship feels a lot more doable, achievable. I could sort of juggle things, because that's kind of what women have to do. They have to juggle all of these different responsibilities. But one thing that I do see is as a result of having to juggle so many things, women also don't think big enough. And they think, okay, I'm just going to do this business as a home business, and they don't necessarily see how you can infuse technology and create it into something far greater and bigger, and actually export that to other countries. So I think there's a lot of work that we still need to do in order to encourage women to think bigger and broader as well.
What kind of support do they need, if you had to narrow it down and kind of support women in the most effective way possible? What kind of support do they need, and who are those people who need to give them support?
I think for women in particular, it's access to markets. So it would be, we work with corporates to give access to different markets. We also work with other ecosystem players. So there's a Hatch in Pakistan, we have ecosystem partners in Bangladesh, and multiple other ecosystem players as well like that. And through connections and partnerships, we're able to actually take them across to other countries. So access to market is one of them. Access to funding is another massive area that actually women need to be supported in as well. And finally, I just think it might seem so simple, but it truly is just mentorship and just speaking to somebody else who's going through the same journey as you. And I think this is, while you sometimes design programs with great experts, what I've come to realize is that if you just speak to someone who's maybe 2 or 3 years ahead of you in your journey, the amount of experience that you can gain is phenomenal. And so I really see the value in peer-to-peer learning, and really that concept of I've gone through this, I've struggled, but let me just pay it forward so someone else who's coming up the ladder doesn't have to struggle as much as I've had to. And I think building that sense of what it's something bigger that we're trying to achieve here, and we're all part of the same journey, I think needs to be communicated a lot more. And those are the kind of conversations that I'm really I'd like to be a part of. Yeah.
And how much has mentorship played a role in your success as well? I think when we've talked before, we've talked about how sometimes that support has come from male allies. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think for me personally, I think coming into Sri Lanka, having lived abroad and trying to grapple with all the different type of things that you have to learn, right, as you put your business together, I think finding the right allies does make a big difference. And I think at the end of the day, it's about the networks that you're able to create. And that's not to say I'm going to use that network. I don't mean it in that way. I mean just learning and being prepared to say, right, I don't know everything, but I'm going to learn from everyone around me, and being really humble enough to have that approach, I think makes a big difference. And I think that you don't need to have like 20 years experience to be a mentor. As I said, I just think if you've experienced something, it can come off as just sharing and not necessarily this is my advice to you, but this is my experience. Take what you will and apply it back into how you need to in your journey.
Yamuna, how have you seen mentorship in support, and how crucial has that been for you?
Interesting question. I think I learn from every experience that I've gone through. I've been fortunate enough to have some level of mentorship, but I've always been the youngest member in the management teams that I've been in, and typically the only female member in the management teams that I've been a part of. So what I realized is, especially when I was going through pregnancy and with very young children at home, my male bosses, or I would say leaders, it's very challenging sometimes for them to relate to what a female may go through during that period as a young mother. So I think it's very important, especially in the corporate world, for female leaders who have been through that process, to mentor and to really connect with other young women who want to kind of continue in their career paths and not necessarily give up, because it's a tough choice to make. And if we want future equal representation of women in future, which is the theme of this sort of conversation, I think we need to encourage and support women to stay in work and not give up. So how do we make that happen? So I would think women who have made it, who have survived, and who have come up on top through the struggles and the experiences that they've had. And I echo what Brindha was saying as well. I think we need to support each other. I think we need to share our experiences. There should be some platform where strong women need to align with other strong women and young women who wish to choose and who wish to stay at work and continue through having children, through marriage, through the curveballs that life throws us, right? So I think women who are successful, who have made it, need to stand together. And it is collectively as women that we can really see improvement by sharing our experiences, right? And I think that's supremely important. And I don't see a lot of that happening. And I would love to see that sort of platform coming up where women who have made it stand together and support each other, because there's a lot we can learn from. There's a lot I can learn from someone who has been through the mill, and whose advice I could learn from. So, I think that's necessary. And I think women shouldn't leave until they have to leave or they choose to leave. Because I mean, I've interviewed many young women in my during my corporate career. So there are girls who are not even married sometimes, who think, okay, you know what, I'm gonna have to take a step back from my career at some point. So I'm gonna take it easy. So they don't ask for that next promotion. They don't push for opportunities. They leave. They take a back seat, so they don't get into those C-level positions. You don't get your corner office, or you don't get a seat at the boardroom if you sit on the sidelines. So I see this happening. I've seen it happen many times. So show up. My advice is show up and take a front seat until you decide and you choose as a woman to kind of maybe relinquish some of those if you have to.
In that reluctancy, what is the role of others? What are the roles of men, of male colleagues, of fathers and brothers and husbands? What is their role, and how do you see that?
I think it's very important to have a supportive partner. I mean, if you have that, that's fantastic. But I'm not entirely sure in Sri Lanka's general cultural context whether most women have that, because most men and women, boys and girls, are still in Sri Lanka, I would say, brought up under typical stereotype ideologies. If you look at the masses, if you watch, with all due respect, a little bit of mass television programs or teledramas, you see the typical gender stereotyping still very, very prevalent. So I think, going back to what Brindha mentioned earlier, it comes from education and it comes from your family as well. So I think we need to start teaching our boys as well that equality means equality at home. Studies show that women do almost twice the amount of housework and almost thrice the amount of childcare while still working a full-time job. Typically, if you take a look at the mental image, if when a guy comes home from work, he gets a cup of tea and his shoes gets removed and royal treatment. But when a woman comes back from work, she has to just tie her hair up and go cook dinner. Right, and she's the one making exactly in work clothes. We can all relate to this, right? This is reality, and let's deal with that. So that has to change in the home front, and I think we have to teach our boys as well that equality means equality at home as well as equality at work.
Maybe equality at home first.
It comes from equality at home, because boys are raised with that psyche as well. So I think mothers also have a responsibility in changing that. Coming back to the point you mentioned earlier, Anush, you mentioned you went for a meeting and there was a panel of ladies there, but until this particular lady went with a male colleague, they did not take her proposal seriously. So there's a lot of psychological stereotyping that needs to be unlearned and changed in both men and women. And I think that comes from education. It comes from changing the narrative and the messaging that you find in our mass media, which is fed to us constantly. So until those things change, I think it'll be challenging, or it'll be tough to see real change in numbers. But of course, the advancement of technology gives permission for women, gives women choice to be themselves and to express their individuality, and also to be more independent and juggle many things, as Brindha mentioned. So things are changing, supported by technology, but I think a lot more can be done.
But let's talk about technology and how that has really changed women's lives. I mean, Anushka, how has technology been transformative, and particularly for women? What are we seeing?
Absolutely, Sherazad. So I think a lot of the constraints that we tend to think about, structural issues holding women back, technology is offering a bright spot, right? Whether it is technology that's empowering entrepreneurship, and consequently entrepreneurship becoming a possible career choice for women, technology is playing a role there. In terms of accessing markets, whether it's international trade or in domestic trade, women being able to access to be able to sell something on their own that's not just at the local, nearby hyper-local market, but being able to export to another district, export to another country, technology has played a huge role. In terms of finding information, typically men tend to occupy most of these networks. Also, in terms of going overseas for B2B sessions or trade fairs, women tend to take a step back or question, should I travel? Now you can get so much of that done online. So I know these are small things, but all enabled by technology. Finding markets, finding information, selling online. So there are examples of recently, because I was looking at this from a more environmental entrepreneurship kind of point of view, we have a problem in our wetlands of water hyacinth and clogging out the waterways. And I came across this fantastic story of some women in Anuradhapura who've started a business around that. So they're not obviously following your typical, corporate career or in the local bank branch, but they're hugely empowered to now sell that on an online marketplace to areas outside of Anuradhapura. They're able to obtain information about how to do this, what is the techniques required, from women who've done this in Thailand without stepping on a plane. So technology is hugely empowering, I think, for entrepreneurship. And if, to Brindha's point, if entrepreneurship is seen as one way out or one alternative amidst these structural problems we have with women in the workplace, I think it's huge. The one thing that I would say, though, is that we can't take it for granted that technology is going to be, empowering and liberating and all of that, because the same problems in inclusion, in gender disparities that we see in school, in finance, in women's access to devices, all of this is only going to get compounded in the digital space, right? So if you already had a social norm or gender norm that biased against women, and you don't educate them, when the family has an opportunity to buy a tab, that same bias is going to come into play. They're going to give the son, not the woman. So the technology is there. Device availability, great. 4G mobile technology, one of the cheapest in South Asia. All that's great. Access is there technically, but those same gender norms, the same disparities could get replicated. So I think that's something to be cautious about. While we are optimistic, while we think it's going to be this game changer, part of it will happen automatically, private initiative, but part of it still will be kind of held back by the structural issues, and we have to make sure that it comes to pass the way technology does offer it, because we can't have that technology transformation has to be inclusive. We can't assume that it's just going to happen because we have devices and we have the internet and so on.
Brindha, when we talk about technology kind of being transformational, to Anushka's point about solving some of these problems of inclusion is important, right? How have entrepreneurs been trying to kind of resolve some of these kind of complex problems using technology?
So in terms of women stepping up and solving more complex problems, I think I'll share one example of someone who went through she was a shortlisted candidate for a program, and she was working in health tech. And what was interesting is while she was working in health tech based in Sri Lanka, she was working with a professor in Cambridge in England. So I think, again, just putting the word out there and saying, hey, this is the problem I'm trying to solve. Who else wants to collaborate with me and make this happen? Again, it comes back down to your individual passion and figuring out why you're doing what you're doing and whether you actually have a market, and then putting it out there and saying, so I think we're moving more towards an environment of collaboration, right? And I think technology can be used to solve really interesting problems, as Anushka shared earlier, and gain that knowledge from different countries and different experts and come together to create something that's not only relevant in Sri Lanka, but actually relevant in the UK as well. And that's profound, right? So I think technology can really play a part in this way. And just sharing another example of how we approach from programmatic sense. We are working with a young girl. She's just turned 18. She joined our program, and her name's Delrini, and she works off on Radha Parade. Seems like the place that a lot of innovation happens. Exactly. We need to start a hatch there. Again, really massively passionate about supporting other female entrepreneurs. So what she does is she runs a paint shop, and because of COVID, she's really had to support her family. I mean, at the age of 16, 17, she's had to really step up and see how can she support her family, and she's taken this on. And when you look at pictures of like where she's set up, it's really a shed, to be honest with you. But she still applied for the program, and she said, look, I can't join the session because I don't have a laptop, but I'm going to join from my phone. So I can't put video on, but it's okay. Like just her sheer passion to participate at such a young age and her drive to see how she could start a business that empowers other women is incredible, and we just need to give opportunity. And I think that's all really we want, that I seek to do, is just create opportunities and platforms for those women to come step forward, because she will just go on to inspire other young women around her, right? And that's just coming back to the concept of paying it forward. So technology isn't necessarily a hindrance. You kind of figure out a way to work around it as well. Yeah.
In a completely different vein, Yamuna, technology is also helping women kind of find balance, right? How have you seen the women balancing or using technology to balance public or professional and private lives?
Oh, I think technology has been a fantastic blessing. I think COVID was a testament to that, where your office is omnipresent through your laptop. So especially, I think what technology provides, or what I can take away from what Brindha and Anush mentioned, was technology provides flexibility, choice where you wish to work from. So you see, the whole idea is we are moving away from the industrial age of working where it's a must to work from 8 to 5 or whatever, to the result or the deliverables of what is required from your work. So it's not necessarily required that you're in a certain physical space for a particular period of time. So that's exactly what women need as well, flexibility. And technology provides that and facilitates that in the workplace in a massive way. And of course, the COVID pandemic fast-tracked it, and it became a very real thing. In the workplace, I think technology is a massive blessing, especially for women who wish to continue in work. So one of the benefits I think that comes out from the COVID pandemic is you might see more women hopefully staying in their jobs because they can work from home on their laptop, provided they have a stable internet connection. And also what Brindha mentioned, where technology has permitted women to gain access to markets and really flourish and succeed, also showcases the fact that if women in the workplace had the flexibility without any bias or any resistance, driven by cultural norms, they can achieve fantastic things. Because women do have wonderful ideas. They have the passion, they have the drive. They can certainly multitask and juggle many things. So if technology and the lack of hindrance, flexibility, and choice can give them that, if we create that environment in the workplace, I think you can see a lot more participation and a lot more productivity in the workplace if that was there. So that's my take on it.
Anushka, how do you convince women that we're at a place where the future is female, and how do you convince women to take advantage of that and grab opportunities with both hands and really see the future as female themselves?
I think I'd point to some of the sectors that in the Sri Lankan economy and globally are doing well and are exciting. And in many of those, nearly all of those, women are playing a huge role. In trade, in global brands, in exports, in finance, of course, in technology, in technology businesses, but also technology-enabled businesses. And social entrepreneurs. So in a lot of the spaces that we are seeing action globally, like interesting things going on, we're seeing women play a huge role. We're seeing female-owned brands and companies. So I think I would point to that. I would ask other women, look at this, what's happening. I would point them to, businesses that are going through some of the Hatch programs and saying, look at what they're doing. So I would point to real stuff that's going on and say, this is where it's at now with all of the structural problems we have. Somebody's working on these structural problems. It may not be fixed overnight. So imagine in the next few years, as these things get worked out slowly but steadily, it's only going to get brighter. But also what I would point to them in terms of bright spots on this future is female is also look at folks who weren't typically inclined to bring women into boardrooms or women into workplaces. They are also changing. There's no place anymore for those who aren't changing. So that's another thing I would point out, that these folks are going to be redundant. They're going to be marginalized. So things are improving. You are gaining more oxygen in the room. So take that opportunity now. The future is definitely female, and we have great role models, mentors right here in Sri Lanka and globally as well. Interestingly, one of the things that we're trying to do is actually set up a regional network for women entrepreneurs, for women in digital and digitally enabled businesses, because we see a lot of these social norms, gender norms in our part of the world, in South Asia, seem to be quite common. So even understanding peer-to-peer, what are those challenges? How did you, as a Bangladeshi tech-enabled business leader, female business leader, win in this space? How did you break into this other market? I think that can also be enabled, and that kind of show and tell, peer learning, genuine mentoring, not just flash in the pan mentoring, but hand-holding for a longer period of time. All of these platforms are being set up. So I think the enabling environment for a female future, for the future to be female is getting shaped. So Yeah, that's what I would point to.
I think that's something that you feel strongly about too, Brindha. And if I could, quickly go around some words of encouragement to women who are kind of listening to this, what would you say? What would you say to them?
My first bit of advice, if I want to call it that, is just get connected to a network. I think once you plug yourself in, then you're aware of different opportunities that arise. And I think there's, like Anushka mentioned, there's a lot of opportunities available both locally and internationally. And it's just about awareness. So while we do our best to kind of get the word out there and spread the word about these opportunities, I think it's also on females to take those opportunities and really step up and say, yes, I'm going to take it forward. And just touching on Yamuna's point earlier, sometimes it's about putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, right, in order to take that next step and progress and build that future that at the end of the day, what they want and what they aspire for themselves. So that's my...
Yamuna, your thoughts as well as we close?
Two things. I would encourage women who have already made it, who are successful, to unapologetically attribute their success to themselves. Stand up for what you have achieved, because you being that light will lead the light and provide permission for other women to do the same thing. You hiding in the shadows serves no one. So stand up and say, I did this, and this is what I did, right? It's not because of anyone else. I did this, right? And that will encourage and light the way for other women. To women who are on their journey, I would say, it's not advice really, it's sharing of experience, I would say. I would say, take a seat at the table, especially for women in the corporate sector. Don't stay on the sidelines. Own up, show up, and demand. When I say demand, work and stand up for what you deserve. Don't check out. Is what I can say, if that makes sense.
I mean, really great last words to leave on. Own up and show up. Thank you so much for all your time. It was such a great discussion. Thanks for all of your insights, and I hope that they resonate well with everyone who's watching today. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
There is injustice happening, and how do you stop it? You have to do something about it. But when you're a child, you don't know how. It's just vague.
We have here in Cheeslace today Ambika Satkunanathan. She's a human rights advocate. She was also a human rights commissioner. Welcome to the program, Ambika.
Thank you very much for having me.
Hi, I'm Sherazad, and I've got Brindha, Yamuna, and Anushka back behind the scenes with me. And I'm just going to ask them a few interesting questions. So I'll start with you, Brindha. Sure. What are you most grateful for?
I think the ability to finally travel.
I think all of us can relate.
Yeah.
Where would you go if you could?
I think, well, it was on my bucket list before COVID happened. It's to go to Patagonia and see the glaciers. So yeah, we booked the tickets and all of that. But hoping to go again soon.
I'll move over to you, Anushka. How do you usually start your day?
I start by giving my dog a really big kiss and make myself a huge mug of coffee.
Oh, wow.
And then eventually when my wife wakes up, a cup of coffee for her too. But number one priority, puppy kiss and big cup of coffee.
Renaissance man with making the wife the cup of coffee.
Yeah.
What's your dog's name?
Rhino.
Okay.
He's a Shih Tzu.
Shih Tzu. Oh,
Yeah.
beautiful, lovely. And Yamuna, what are your hobbies?
I'm an avid painter. I do portraits, actually. Very amateur still, but it's a work in progress. I also sing, despite protests from my kids. So
What do you sing that makes them protest so much?
everything that I sing, anything and everything makes them protest, unless it's a Disney song, of course.
Yeah.
So we all sing.
But the painting, how did you come to that?
I've always painted since I was a kid, so it's my escape from reality at times. So it's my go-to peace place.
Brindha, what are your favorite quotes, and what words would you live by?
I think something that's really held true to me and my husband is anything is possible, because I think we've really seen this in our journey, and I think that's something that we kind of need to remind ourselves of every day in everything we do.
Yamuna, let's find a toughie for you.
All right.
What is your guilty pleasure?
There are many, but of course I'm passionate about chocolate. But of course, there's many more. One must have guilty pleasures to escape to. So I will leave it
This
at
is
that.
off camera. We'll have a chat off camera. Brindha, back to you. If you could tell me one word that describes you.
I think introvert. I think that's something that I'm working on, but that's probably what describes me. Yeah.
So what is most important, and what is the key to happiness in your life?
Freedom of choice.
And why is that particularly important?
As a mother and as a woman, you have a lot of responsibilities. I think it's very, very important to be empowered enough financially, career-wise, even in your personal life, to be able to choose what is best for you and what is best for your loved ones. So freedom of choice equals happiness to me, because without choice, you're stuck. And that's not a fun place to be in. So to me, freedom and the power of choice is supremely important.
What do you think the key is to living a good life?
Time. I think being able to spend your time the way you want. I think it's for many people it's a luxury. I don't think any of us could say that we have that necessarily, but I think time is finite, and if you want to spend as much part of it living a good life, I think time is one.
Well, what is the key to a good life?
Key to a good life, I think, probably balance. I think it's something that I've really struggled with, juggling so many things, because when I was running Hatch, I actually had a full-time job as a legal consultant in the UK. So I would work Hatch in the morning and then do that until 2-3 in the morning. So again, massively lacking that balance, and it meant that I had health complications and all of that, and just trying to have balance and that sense of peace. When I go home, I can switch things off and just watch Netflix if I want to. So yeah.
At Sunshine, we've always been gender neutral or gender blind, as it were. So when this whole COVID thing came about, our approach didn't change that much. It was a more people-centric approach that we always adopted. So from caring for our people, guiding them through a very uncertain time were things that we were looking to achieve. And like you very rightly said, it was all about transforming business. I mean, we never knew what to anticipate. None of us knew that it would take this long. We had not in our lifetime seen this kind of thing before. So you could have imagined the turmoil. And predominantly Sunshine is in essential services. So we operate in healthcare, we also operate in consumer, and we operate in agri. All very important sectors. We started figuring out that, in this environment of such uncertainty, obviously we had to start looking at it from a holistic perspective. And then we fell back to what we were very good at doing, because if you take a product launch, we look at it holistically, right? If you take a kind of project you're trying to execute, it's a holistic approach. So then we thought people, human beings, well-being, welfare, why can't all of this also be holistic? So that is something that prompted us to look at, this 360 perspective of how we can do things. It is important to Sunshine because at the end of the day, we are in a people business, right? We all are. What would our products be if not backed by our people? So obviously it is important to create an experience for our employees that is something that they'd want to have, and that is something that we would want to give them as well. So when it comes to our purpose is to bring good things to life, right? And when you talk about a pandemic and when you talk about healthcare, I mean, we had to rise to that particular challenge. So rising to the challenge meant mobilizing and transforming our people, to give them the courage to know that we are there behind them, and probably they are very much with them. So, it was not an uncommon sight to see the very senior management also on the shop floor. What we mean by a holistic approach is an approach that consists of not only taking care of the physical need of the person, but also the mental needs of the person, the other needs like career needs, for example, the need for something as basic as security, and something that is actually stable. How do we create that environment? So the first element of this whole thing was actually centered around communication and trying to shed light into what all this was about. It was about inspiring people by telling them that, reinforcing the fact that they were actually doing something for the people. There was a huge higher purpose in why we were doing our work. We had to make our country healthier. We had to help the country to get out of this. We started looking at how do we make a safer environment for the people. We started looking at how can we have female role models. And we started looking at when we promote, when we recruit, do we actually look at gender at all? And the answer to that is we were very gender neutral. In fact, we would try to see how we can resource or bring in females. So like I said, it's a case of the creation of that safe work environment. It's a creation also of an understanding working environment that helps a woman to come to work. We're planning loads more in this area of trying to get females in. For example, we hired country managers for our medical devices sector, female. So having females like that coming into the workforce in senior roles helps others also to gain a level of comfort and actually come into it. So that's something that we've done. In order to commemorate Women's Day, we're planning on launching a whole, package of things that I believe would help the female come to work.
Randhula, are you ready?
She says with echelon.
Today, we're going to be talking about thriving in the unconventional with someone who shakes things up wherever she goes. I'm so pleased to be sitting down with Randhula de Silva, the CEO and founder of Good Life X. Hi, Randhula.
Hi, Nikki.
So I'm going to start off with something I actually read on your LinkedIn, which is you described yourself as a catalyst. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Sure. So when I started the work that I do, and when I came along working through all the things that I have, it took me a little while to understand that what I'm really doing is working with really different subsectors and different worlds and walking in between them, identifying gaps and filling voids and connecting people, bringing them together to create new possibilities and new realities. And I'm like, what is this? What is this that I continue to do and I like doing? And that's when I came across the concept of being a catalyst. It's widely used out there, and that basically is somebody who sees the bigger picture, who understands the longer term change and brings together a lot of people, a lot of possibilities to create an entirely new reality by making things happen faster and making connections that are unapparent and lateral.
So you talk about filling a void. And that makes me think of the current work you are doing with Good Life X. So Good Life X, in my understanding, is a program for the value chain to support entities in the value chain. So can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Sure. So when you say value chain, we started working with companies who are working across nature-based value chains. So food and agriculture, wellness and travel, and design. These are the spaces that we initially started off to work with as an accelerator back in 2019. Why we started working in this space is because back then, I come with a lot of experience of working with the startup ecosystem and amazing people who are there in the innovation ecosystem. What I noticed and observed was there's so much of interest and hype and even resources going into pure tech and tech-based innovations and startups, whereas there's a lot of spaces in Sri Lanka in the traditional sectors and along the natural value chains that needs a lot of disrupting, that needs a lot of innovation. And can we connect all of this excitement that's there in the young entrepreneurship arena into these spaces that can really thrive, that really the world is asking for? So disconnecting these disconnected dots were what led me to begin the work with Good Life X. And today we are much more than working with startups and beyond just being an accelerator. We work with SMEs as well as corporates. And what we also do is we constantly reinvent our game and what we bring to the table. And today we are here to really create a transition from the old economy into the new, where we help any entity, private sector, public sector, large or small, to become a regenerative company rather than being an extractive company, so that Asia can really lead from the future and create a regenerative space here in Sri Lanka and in Asia, because we are abundant with the natural resources we have, and restoration economy is going to be here to stay, and we are here to make Sri Lanka ready for that.
You said something interesting, that the work you do helps with Good Life X transitions from the old economy to the new. You must face some resistance to that
Every day.
And how do you deal with it?
I think there's two ways we can do this, right? We can continue to talk. We can also walk the talk. So I think we started talking after doing the work for 3 years, and after all the programs that we've implemented, working with 60 plus entrepreneurs, and all the work that we've done in these spaces, and how the companies really have changed their game and thrived with the work that we've done together, I think we are in a position to showcase those changes and give proof to people who are resistant, people who are not ready to believe, people who are not ready to change for very many good or bad reasons. It doesn't matter. So we put forward such examples, and we make it comfortable for anybody to then convert and work with us. And also, we are not sitting in a comfortable chair telling people what to do. We roll up our sleeves and get to work with them. And that really is what makes things possible for us in creating that change.
So you said something which I really like. You said you need to walk the talk. And you are walking in fairly uncharted territory. So how have you been able to navigate this space, which is very new in Sri Lanka?
So, I mean, not only in startups or the innovation ecosystem, right? I work in social, cultural aspects and creating disruptions or creating things differently there as well. So it basically is my passion to see things beyond a box and to really ability to see things with a certain element of freedom in my mind. And that perhaps is my gift, and to make action out of those possibilities that I see is something that I continually am trying to do and like to do. So this is what I try to practice across all fields that I'm active in. And I think when a person tries to make all of these changes, good things happen, bad things happen, but you also get a lot of people who recognizes the possibility and the potential of these things. So I don't think I would have been able to create anything or do anything that I did if not for those who recognized the need for it and came to join the revolution or join the journey. So I don't want to take credit for anything or anything that I am doing. It is definitely effort of a lot of other people who recognizes it, but also effort of a lot of other people who say that we can't, because that gives us a reason to really intensify our efforts to make it really work and find ways to make it work.
And I'm just curious to hear, has this journey been difficult being a woman, or has it been easier to break through some of these barriers?
I don't like to look at things in a general lens. I know you know this. And sometimes when I started doing this and when I assumed leadership positions in the private sector, walking into boardrooms, I think I had a sense of even naivety to believe that nothing like gender would really apply. I mean, it was just not something that I have in my head. So I don't expect it to be there at all. It's just out of my reality. But then that was really shattered early on. I understood not even gender, not only even gender, but a lot of other things really matter for you to be heard. And that's when I realized what it is to be doing this as a woman of my age also, because people need a lot of things, unfortunately, to take you seriously. Good ideas and good work itself is not enough. So being consistent in your delivery, being serious about the work that you want to do, and being honest and transparent about the mistakes that you make, and gathering up the support of the right people who can also intensify your efforts are very, very important, regardless whether you're a man or woman. I think resistance is there for anybody who's trying to do something for the first time or somebody who's doing something afresh. Perhaps for a woman it's harder, but also there's advantages of it now, especially. And when you've come to a position where you've done a lot of things and you've delivered good results, I think things can get easier because you know what you're doing and you've made a lot of mistakes and you've learned from it, and you have the power to also, ability to also win people over to grow things differently and grow things out large.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but your entire team at the Good Life program is female.
Yes, that's right.
Was that a conscious decision?
That's a nice question. It wasn't that, it really wasn't me wanting to or choosing to work with girls only at all. There were interviews that was conducted for all these positions, and I must tell you, this is a very interesting phenomena when I look back at it. When Good Life X transitioned from being a pilot project under a own entity, we first started as a pilot inside a own entity, right? And then we created a spin-off as a private limited company. When that shift was going to happen, things were very great. People called it a black box. People were asking, how are you going to make this self-sustainable? How are you really going to make this work? And it's not been done before. And I'm not saying we've made it. We are on our way. We are creating the path as we go. But very few boys who were also in my team back then were ready to jump in and take that risk. And I must say it happened in January 2021 at the height of the pandemic also. So it's a massive risk to take, to come into a new company who's trying to do things in a new way, and above, with all the uncertainties around us, you don't know when the lockdowns are finishing, you don't know whether you're going to have bread or milk at your home. On top of all of that, you're asked to join a brand new company who's trying to do something really new, and it seems very great. It's really girls who put up their hands and said, we want to join this, and we want to do this change and to be part of this together with you. So the operations teams is all girls. I have one boy who's working with me though, and shout out to Hari. Because of him, our podcast series is a reality, and he's still in school. So you can imagine what it's like to this one guy to be working with the all-girls team. But it's working out fantastically. And I must say, girls have the ability to look at things much more laterally. And you don't need all the answers to take action. Whereas when I work with even very experienced men that I have a lot of respect for, there's a lot of questions that needs answering before an action needs to be taken. And I see that difference at every new thing that we try to do. But that said, I have 3 brilliant men who are sitting in my board, who are lateral thinkers themselves. So I think it's not a gender bias thing, to be precise, but when it comes to working with the all-girls team, it makes things very easy when you're creating change.
I mean, I definitely agree with you. I think the pandemic has shown us that women thrive in the unconventional. If you see the countries that responded to the outbreak the best, they were women-led countries. And that says something about women in positions of power and taking decisions. And I think it also speaks a lot to the empathy women have. And you touched on this in your last answer about why why women thrive under these circumstances. But have you seen this in other areas of your life as well?
Absolutely. I think it's a given that if you take a look at gender roles, for centuries, women have been thriving in the unconventional every day, at home, at work, whatever roles that they may be playing in the economy or in the society. We are given problems that needs solutions, and sometimes it's almost life or death of us, of our own, or of somebody that we are nurturing. So I think intrinsically we are trained to be responsive in a very innovative and effective way, without always having projections analysis and everything laid out for us. So I think it's now coming more and more into the business world. It's coming more and more into positions of power, and we are seeing the impact that of such thinking and such ability coming into the mainstream power dynamics. That's why it's spoken of much more now. It's nothing new. It's nothing new that women are able to do things laterally and effectively and can thrive in a crisis. I think it's seen more because women have assumed positions of power more, and it's shedding light to the capabilities and abilities that has been dimmed upon centuries ago. You and I both know how Western and Eastern civilizations had women-led economies and countries, and how the tables turned over time. I think we are slowly turning the tables again.
Speaking of the unconventional, your work around startups is well known. You have Good Life X, you've worked with Hatch, the work you do with IREX as well. A little lesser known fact about you is that you are a social activist and you work on some amazingly interesting projects in spaces which are deemed very unconventional. So can you talk to me a little bit about some of those projects and how you reconcile the two, working in the startup ecosystem and also in this area of social change?
Yeah, so I think what gets me excited is to see possibility and create a new reality out of that possibility. And I really get restless around conventional things that are very boxish. You know, I really don't like boxes. So I think why I chose to work with startups and even work with SMEs and corporates in a very innovative way is my flair for change and flair for a better change. And the work that I do in the social and cultural space, and that goes far back before my career in the startup space as well, where I've done constant and different projects like Occupy the Square, if you remember, in 2015. You can look it up still. To Avilena Suli, the movie that I did or executive produced. And things like Freedom Hub, that really helps younger influencers and innovators to create new voices and new content. So I think for me, these are not two different things. They are perhaps two different spaces.
Yeah.
For me, and this is why I say I'm a catalyst, for me, it's the same change that I'm trying to create for people who have found their gift in two different spheres, be it entrepreneurship, be it media, or be it creativity. Everybody has the potential to do something new in order to grasp a different and a better change for themselves and the people around them. That's why innovation is important. That's why entrepreneurship is important, to disrupt the status quo of the economic conditions of Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the arts and culture, they are important for the change of the mindset of a society, for change of how society is going to create its norms and values. Without that change happening, entrepreneurs can go so far. You know, they will hit a plateau. So even though these two things seem disconnected, they really are interconnected as much as so many other things are. And that's how systems change happen. And you will go so far by putting all this energy into the innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem. But if the mindset of the country and the system is stagnant at a different box, you can't go too far, or you can't break through that plateau that you will hit there. So these things are parallel and connected, and that's why I try to do whatever I can in all spaces that I get access to.
So from what you said, innovation is key, and you have done, you know, a huge amount of work in that space. But what more can be done?
I don't think I've done a huge amount of work, honestly, Nikki.
Okay.
I mean, I've been in the innovation space for the past 8 to 10 years.
Yeah.
There's been so many people who've done amazing things in this country that aren't celebrated enough. I must say that.
That's true.
I've done a few things and I'm still trying to grow them and collect a lot of more traction. I think there needs to be more of us. There can't be enough. In different spaces, in different specialities and expertise, it needs to happen. Either education, either entrepreneurship, either arts, either culture, either private sector or public sector. There needs to be more people who sees beyond the conventional and are comfortable to be uncomfortable, are comfortable to be in the unknown. And everything that COVID taught us, everybody in the world understood that change is going to be the only consistent. And this is nothing new. This is something that we know through Buddhism and so many other religions too. But people really like to live the same life every day and call it a life. You know, make the same product for 25 years and call it a successful intervention. But there can be so much more that you can do with your skills, your power, your resources that can also create a net positive impact to yourself and to the community and the society that you're connected to. So how can a business do good while doing well? How can an artist continue to thrive and do well too? Right now, artists in our country aren't doing great at all. I mean, that's been a consistent thing for decades. So these things really need to change. And I think it takes a lot of people who see things differently and are willing to change the game, step up and just get it done.
You know, you said something interesting about how a lot of people are static in a way, that they need this change in mindset. Do you think the multiple roles you have had throughout your career has helped you enhance your knowledge, have this different outlook on life?
I think so. I truly believe so. Multiple careers and also multiple exposures to different spheres. What I get exposed to in the arts and culture world helps me so much to look at things creatively and laterally in the business world, and vice versa. And that's how I ended up executive producing this film, because I had the private sector composure to come and drill into a project that was hanging with a shoestring budget, which had to be, bootstrapped like a startup, and to see it to fruition. So I think, yes, it has definitely helped me. And I went into university at the age of 21 in Sri Lanka, but I started working when I was 19. My first position was as an intern in an international bank here, and I had no intentions of being a banker. I went in because my mother was a banker, and that was like the first door that she could open for me. But from there to now, all positions that I've said yes to has given me something in return. In event management, in comparing, in writing up PR articles, all these things that I did as an undergraduate really helped me form what I am today and my skill set today, which gives me the ability to deliver results in very many different methods and spheres. And this is something that I try to give my team as well. In my team, we don't have designations or roles. They get to be their own CEO in their own project, and they get to give me work to do for them, so that they learn on the job how to become a leader as well. And those are things that are really essential and important, especially in the future, if not now.
So they say change is uncomfortable but necessary. I think you have spent your career instigating change, whether it be through Good Life X and diversifying the export basket, or Freedom Hub, disrupting, and Media Inc. for that matter, disrupting the media space. What would you say to people who are hesitant of change?
I mean, the more you resist it, the more hard it's going to be. So it's all about letting go and embracing the next moment, and being receptive of whatever form or shape it might take. If you're really going to be fixated and holding hard onto one thing, and we saw how companies like that crumbled during COVID, right? It's inevitable and you can't predict it. It's not something that you can prepare yourself for. The only thing that you can prepare yourself for is to be open to change. And when you say change, it can happen in two ways. You can either be a creator of change, and that's what I call disruptive. You disrupt something or the status of something as if from where it is and build something new. You can also let change happen to you. You go with the flow. Not everybody has got to be an innovator. Not everybody needs to be a disruptor. But you can also let change happen to you without resisting it, in order for you to grow and evolve as a human being and maximize your own potential. And that really is growth at the end.
So just embrace the change. Let it happen to you. Randhula, it has been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for being with us here today.
It's an absolute pleasure chatting with you, Nikki. I hope you had as much as fun as I did.
Of course.
Hi,
my name is Shela Nathaniel, and I will be taking you through this interesting conversation on how to slay your imposter on echelons. She slays. On my panel, I've got Dhananjay, Nisreen, and Minoli. Stay tuned.
This is the rapid fire round with Randhula de Silva on She Slays by Echelon. Randhula, are you ready?
Go for it.
Who is your inspiration and why?
It really depends on what kind of thing I am trying to deal with. There's very many different role models that I look up to, either my peers or people who've really done things differently and lived in their own terms.
And if you were to write a book, what would it be about?
Slaying it.
I love it. Were you given any nicknames by your friends?
Randu for short, Randy, I really don't know why.
That's the one. What would you say to your younger self?
Chill out, never compromise on personal well-being for work.
So true. What are things you dislike?
Status quo makes me uncomfortable. Untapped potential makes me restless, like crazy in a person or in a situation or a context. So those are two things that I really don't like.
What a fitting career path you have chosen then.
I hate leeches too.
What is your favorite quote or words to live by?
Less is more.
What does being female mean to you?
Being at a status of power, I think.
Okay, interesting. What are you most grateful for?
Very many things. This life I have, the opportunities that I have, the country that I live in, the people that I meet and have in my life. I think it'll be an endless list. But to really be here, present at this moment, surrounded with things that I have that I'm grateful for.
One word that best describes you?
Disruptive.
What is one missed opportunity that you wish you could have a second chance at?
I think practicing my arts more. It's something that I love to do, not just painting, but also drama. These are things that I practiced until I was 25. I would love to pick it up again. I would have loved to continue without really taking a pause to begin with.
What does equality mean to you?
I think having access to opportunity, having the same access to opportunity as everybody is having equality, I think.
What trends are you into nowadays?
Trends. I am the trend, Nikki.
I didn't doubt that. What is your deepest fear?
Of being bored, of not being in a place doing things that are resonating to my heart and to what I believe in. The feeling of being stuck. I really fear of being there, and I constantly strive to be out of anything that makes me feel that way.
How do people see women as leaders today?
I think capable and powerful, because we've had a lot of people coming out and proving of what women are truly capable of and have been capable of for centuries. And I think being alive as a woman right now is a good and a great thing to be.
This is going to be an interesting one. How do you balance work and life?
I think boundaries, having the right team, going by the principles of less is more and doing what's essential and doing it well, and knowing what's priority in my personal life as well as work. Time management is super important. Delegation is super important. Saying yes and no is super important. And knowing what makes you happy is super important. So that you are on top of things and not really drowning with everything, either in personal life or professional life.
And finally, what advice do you have for young women aspiring to be all they can be?
Go out there and be yourself. Do your thing. Be uncompromising. Have empathy. Listen. Be confident but not arrogant, because that's not going to take you anywhere.
Hi, I'm Nikita Samaratunga, and I'll be in conversation with Samadani Kiriwandeniya talking about empowering through financial inclusion on She Slays by Echelon.